So what is this dialectic? Here is our 9-point guide to what we believe the dialectic to be.
Number 1. The defense of minorities at all costs.
2. Attack the majority, because there is no sympathy for them, and there are more people with indefensible views in the majority.
3. Anybody who discusses people, culture or nationality, and is not following the narrative must be called racists and bigots.
4. Remove all negative language from your speech.
5. Use thought-terminating cliches wherever possible.
6. With any conflict of interests, ideas, or freedoms, always revert to protecting the weakest and the minorities, regardless of what is sensible or democratic.
7. Attack using sexual guilt, prudishness and sexual morality wherever possible. It is humanity's weak point.
8. Generalization. When somebody generalizes to defend a point of view, they are doomed, because you can always find an example that does not hold with the average and use it to terminate argument and make your opponent feel guilty. The only exception is that the narrative can generalize when talking about an evil group and implying fault lies with the majority. That is, it is acceptable to say most pedophiles are white middle-aged men with credit cards. It is not acceptable to say most white middle-aged men are pedophiles. Use with caution.
9. When all else fails, compare your opponent to Adolf Hitler.
The narrative or dialectic is a bolt-on Mother Teresa kit. And like Mother Teresa, the deeper you look, the more the shine comes off. Let's look into some of these topics.
You cannot be criticized yourself if you defend a minority. When challenged about the fact minorities are protected, talk about a place or time when they were not protected, and say continued protection and payback is due to them. When challenged that a minority is not behaving well, always say it is because of their oppression. The majority always loses.
There's always someone to blame amongst the majority. For example, you can always find a person who wants to send them back home to where they came from. If you can't find somebody with that attitude, next best is someone who wants sensible immigration control. Merely brand them racist. Additionally, to strengthen your case, you can find an example of somebody who is useful to society, who would be dead if they had not been granted asylum.
Never be afraid to call anybody a racist if they are white. If it should turn out your white-skinned opponent says they have a black spouse or girlfriend or child, do not panic, go straight back into the attack. Racism is a fluid concept, and no longer means only discrimination of people of a different race from you. It means anything you want. Don't it? A person called racist will never do anything except backpedal and deny it.
4 and 5. Let's deal with these together. An excellent reference is George Orwell's oft-quoted book, 1984, which serves equally as a warning and an excellent instruction manual for regimes that want to be controlling in this way. Here is the Wikipedia quote.
In George Orwell's novel 1984, the fictional constructed language newspeak is designed to reduce language entirely to a set of thought-terminating cliches. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World Society uses thought-terminating cliches in a more conventional manner, most notably in regard to the drug soma, as well as modified versions of real-life platitudes, such as, "A doctor a day keeps the gym jams away."
Negative language has its problems for the PC. It is important to portray the world in a PC light, especially when talking about minorities behaving badly. They cannot behave badly, because that is against the narrative. Therefore, if a particular Jewish community in Sweden gets its synagogue burned down and is ousted, then the local Muslim population has not been violent. Instead, this is a sensitive topic with two sides to it.
There are no problems with the doctrine, so nothing needs fixing. This sensitive topic, that sensitive caring BC people cope with in immature ways, then swept under the carpet. Do not be afraid about the people who lost their homes at the hands of these thugs. They are just more victims for you to be compassionate about.
Once negative language is conquered, the next step is to reduce language to a series of thought-terminating cliches as we see in the mainstream media such as the BBC all the time. Here is the definition.
Thought-terminating cliché. A thought-terminating cliché is a commonly used phrase, sometimes passing as folk wisdom, used to quell cognitive dissonance, hijack a cause that cannot be argued with, for example, LGBT rights and human rights.
It is important to use a saying that cannot be argued with. For example, the strongest one is pedophile. Link it to nonconformists and all thought and criticism terminates.
Here is an example. Supposing you want to forward an unpopular cause such as more microchipping the population with a chip that can track your movements using the GPS system. There are two elements to it.
Firstly, with respect to the competing freedoms involved, in this case freedom from crime and personal freedom, always defend minorities at all costs, as per points 1 and 6 of the dialectic.
Defend the rights of children as the ultimate victims. Then, as per point 5, use the thought-terminating cliché of child abductors. Here is how a recent example on BBC Radio 5 worked.
In 1994, David Icke predicted GPS-enabled microchipping would be introduced within a few years. He said that not only would it be embraced by the population as a whole, we would be rabid for it. Anybody who did not want it would be outcast and mistrusted. I thought he was wrong, but then I did not understand the narrative. On a Radio 5 show about this back in 2008, they were discussing this issue, as it is now technically possible to have the GPS signal received by the microchip and transponded to a local transmitter in similar fashion to the chip in your passport. One man came on and enabled points 1, 5 and 6 in one fell sweep. He said, "This will eliminate child abduction. Anybody who does not want this is evil and should be shot, as they are just as bad as the child abductors. What rights does anybody have over the safety of my children?" All debate ended. He won.
Point 6 is more important nowadays when you realize that some rights are mutually exclusive. Your need to operate a priority system.
Point 7. Anybody with a religious background will have some guilt attached. Some people believe sex to be an abuse of women, which is even better, so prostitution and pornography are easy targets, and have a narrative all of their own.
Point 8. It is important to become blind to the real use of statistical analysis of populations. It is hard to argue with the statement "you can never generalize," because then your opponent has to argue how he is talking about a section of people, and it is difficult for him to make that point and maintain concentration on his statement about the segment of that population that he was talking about. This makes you appear to be defending the minority, even though your advocate was not talking about that minority.
Finally, point 9. The BC are obsessed with Nazis and Adolf Hitler. They need them. You cannot turn on the BC-controlled History Channel without a documentary about Hitler. He is needed, so they can say, "Look how it ends," or "Look what happened last time," or "See what you are acting like." He is the thought-terminating cliché that must be continually be kept in mind, so that they can say, "If you do not agree with me, then this is what you are." It is thought-terminating and shaming. You are instantly on the defensive, saying you are not a Nazi instead of arguing your point of view.
In part 3 we will look into Korean War brainwashing techniques that help to refine politically correct training and maintenance.